when the lead becomes molten and starts to oxidize on the top in the furnace, the bone ash cupels absorb the lead oxide like a sponge, but the metal stays down here in the very bottom, and so you're constantly shedding off the lead oxide into the cupel, and once all the lead is oxidized, you'll be left with a little tiny precious metal bead at the bottom. And we have a bunch of lead, so I'm probably going to use 4 or 5 of these and heat them all at once so we can drive off the lead and hopefully end up with 5 little tiny beads of precious metal. Here's our lead down in there, and it's starting to melt. It's melting pretty quick into our crucible. And I have the cupels around the top of the furnace there, and they're just heating up. We'll get them up to maybe 300 or 400 degrees. I wanted to get them warm before I poured the molten lead into them, just so I didn't have any thermal shock and any breakage on the cupels. All right, so there they are. I got 5 of them in there. I couldn't fit all 7, but they're in there. I really don't know what's going to happen. We might end up with lead all over the bottom of the furnace, or might end up with 5 little precious metal beads. But we'll get her fired up here and see how it goes. Now what we're seeing here is the lead melts at about 650 degrees Fahrenheit, but the lead oxide doesn't melt until about 1650 degrees Fahrenheit. And so on these cupels, there's a lead puddle underneath there, and now we're just reaching the temperature where the lead oxide on top is starting to melt, and it's sloughing off and being absorbed by the cupel. Now we've reached the temperature where the lead oxide is fully melted and has been absorbed into the cupel. And you can see the little dark kind of bubbles of lead oxide that are forming on the surface there. And they're just sloughing off, they're rolling off down, and once they touch the cupel, they become absorbed. And that process continues on until all the lead is oxidized. Our lead buttons are getting quite a bit smaller now as the lead continually oxidizes. And I've kind of experimented a little bit. I didn't want to get it too hot because in some of my old readings I've done, if you get the temperature really high, you're going to start losing some precious metals, especially silver. You want to keep the temperature somewhere between about 1800 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as keep fresh oxygen flowing to oxidize the lead, and keep the temperature even throughout the furnace during the process. And as you can see, this cupel on the far right-hand side here is cooler than the rest. So it's a little bit hard to do in a gas combustion furnace. tried my best to get one of these beads blinking over as the last little bit of lead oxidizes. And this bead here, it's a little bit hard to tell because of the heat waves from the furnace, but I think it blinks over right about now. And we're left with our precious metal bead. And here they are out of the furnace. I actually can't believe how big those beads are. I thought they'd be tiny little specks. These are the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 that ended up oxidizing. The 5th one here that was over the right next to the burner didn't get hot enough to keep the oxide on top melted, so I'll have to do that one. And then these other 2 here that I didn't have room for. But man alive, that's a lot of precious metals there that were recovered from our crushed up cupels. All right, here's our 7 cupels after they've all been oxidized. All the lead's been oxidized. This one here on the end, it fell apart when I grabbed it with my tongs, but the other 6 stayed intact. And as you can see, we recovered quite a bit more gold and silver. So here's our 7 little beads, and we ended up with 3.15 grams when it was all said and done. And so I've added our 7 little beads. I've put, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 grams of lead in a cupel, and I'm going to reuse one that just came out of the furnace. And this is, again, literally just to pull them all together as one single bead, and then we can do our analysis on it. Oh, look at there, the lead's already melting in the in the crucible or in the cupel. It's still warm enough. Okay, there they are, all pulled together. And that cupel broke as well when I got it out, and you can see it's totally saturated. It's gray all the way through, whereas this one on the left still has some of the tan color from the original cupel. So here's all our beads kind of conglomerated into one, and I'll get this set up so we can try and figure out the carat of this gold. It looks like it has quite a bit of silver in it. But we'll get an underwater weight and compare it with this weight, and we'll see what kind of value we have. Okay, now this is kind of goofy looking, but I'll tell you what I'm doing here. So we have the a little jug of water there, and there's a piece of wire going down into the water. It's not touching the cup in any way. It's elevated off the bottom, but it's submerged in the water. We've zeroed the scale. And so we have the weight of the initial button. Now we're going to weigh the amount of water that the button displaces. So when I put that gold bead on that little loop on the wire, the water level will rise a little bit, and the gold is going to displace the water, and we can weigh the amount of water that we displace, and then we can divide the amount of water weight by the original weight of the button and get a carat value or a percent gold and silver value. So there's our little gold bead sitting on that little wire platform, and you can see the weight on the scale is 0.23 grams. So we've displaced 0.23 grams worth of water. So now let's do a calculation and figure out the density of that button. So here's our little calculation. Our dry gold button weighed 3.14 grams. The amount of water we displaced was 0.23 grams. And so when you divide those two, we ended up with 13.65, which is the density of that bead. So there's a bunch of charts online that you can look up the density of the bead if it's just gold and silver, and it'll give you the carat gold. And I did that online. I'll post a link to the website here in the description. But it came out to be about 13 karat gold, which is roughly about 540 parts gold per thousand. And so when you end up doing the math on that, we ended up getting 1.7 grams of gold and 1.44 grams of silver. So not too bad out of a bunch of junk I was just going to throw away. So a couple more thoughts before I sign off here. I ended up cupeling about, 70 grams or so of gold in all those used cupels we reprocessed. And so that ends up being about 2 or 2.5% loss of gold. So we didn't actually lose that much, but I cupelled a whole bunch in the Portland cement. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much gold end up here. And another question I'm sure I'm going to get is, can you reuse the lead as a collector metal again once it's been recovered from the cupels? And you probably could to a point,
But as the base metals start building up in the lead that you're recovering and reusing, it's going to get harder and harder to get a good QPEL off your buttons and get clean gold. So because lead's so cheap, I just dump the lead that you recover, recycle it, and get new lead from fishing weights or roofing or something like that. So you're using fresh lead every time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments on what you saw today, please let us know. You can find our contact info in the description below.